You're listening to part 2, an interview with the third place winner of the Catholic University Center for Human Rights annual Human Rights Essay Contest by William Saunders, Director of the Center for Human Rights. To read the award-winning essays, go to humanrights.catholic.edu.
I'll just tell the listener again, this is a short essay, so you have to be selective to take up one problem and to suggest how to deal with it. So what did you do, Jonathan?
Yeah, and I'd like to glom on something you said really quick. I work for a lawyer at the Army, very senior level attorney, and he was recently explaining to my 9-year-old what he did. She asked, "What do you do?" And he says, "So I'm a lawyer. I solve problems for people." So I think there's a lot to be said for that. Is that this is a problem, and and I think if we look at it that way, we're gonna be better off, and we're gonna be able to come up with a better, I think, more creative solution to kind of look at it in those simple terms. I just wanted to throw that in quickly, so you raised a good point. But the one I selected, there was obviously a large list of major human rights atrocities in China ongoing now. I picked arbitrary arrest and basically the prohibition against labor unions. So they were kind of, they were kind of doubled up under one item there. But I really didn't want to touch the arbitrary arrest thing, only because I didn't quite know how to navigate, the United States or the American people trying to give the Chinese government advice on arbitrary arrest, considering that, and being a law enforcement employee myself, my entire career. I'm just sensitive to the fact that there are issues with law enforcement in American society. So I decided to kind of put that aside and focus on the prohibition against labor unions. And what I tried to do, again, speaking practically, was as hard as it might be to do this, is to try and, for lack of a better word, sell the Chinese government on the financial benefits of labor unions. So I did some research on unions here, and as controversial as they might have been at their birth, and as they continue to be, they do provide certain fiscal benefits. And that just sort of got me thinking about, okay, again, what is going to resonate with the Chinese government? And it's not, a moral lecture. It's not, kind of a parent telling the child what to do. It's, hey, you should do this not only because it's the right thing to do, but because it's going to be good for your bottom line. And then, I think once we were able to make some traction there, which hopefully we would, then we could begin building towards solution to these other problems. So instead of trying to tackle this whole gamut of civil rights issues all at once, pick one thing where you think you might be able to make a difference, where you think you might be able to gain a foothold. I've been teaching at Catholic in addition to being a student since 2019. And when I tell my students, especially those who are interested in national security careers, think of your career as a construction project. You have to get your building blocks and start building the foundation. I think of international affairs, at least this situation, in roughly the same way. We have to start, but laying the foundation, incremental progress. We're not going to be able to build this thing all at once. And we need to start with something that maybe is roughly attainable. And this just looked like something that, hey, if I'm thinking about this practical approach, this seems like a very practical issue. So let's start here. Let's start with prohibition against labor unions. And again, let's show China why it's in their best interest. And then we start building toward progress on some of these other, let's call them squishier kind of human rights issues. So it's a process, and this is what I saw as a good first step.
Yeah, and excuse me, we will publish Jonathan's essay on the webpage. In fact, it'll be published when this is released, so you can read the whole thing. But I think that's a good overview. And the sting, Jonathan, is, I don't want to take that away from you. What's the sting? This may sting.
I mean, I think the sting is just that certain people, I think, will read this and say, including my own father, and and say, oh, this is going to be really hard. This is looks like this is going to be politically weaponized by opponents or whoever happens to suggest this, especially I think here in the United States. But it's a means to an end. It's, again, I think we're often very emotional about this. We're emotional, and as well we should be. But I think if we have an approach where we keep our emotions, playing the right role in the right place, balanced with other kinds of approaches, I think we're going to be better off because we just get angry at China, or we get angry at Ukraine, or we get angry at North Korea, or we get angry at Israel or Palestine, wherever people happen to fall on the political spectrum. I think it would depend, but I don't think we're going to get anywhere. So the sting comes in is that we're helping someone that we've, at least to a certain extent, being the United States, identified as an adversary, whether it be economically, politically, militarily, civil rights oriented. So, that's where the kind of the pain comes in. But I think relative to what we could achieve in the long term, I think the pain the temporary pain will be worth what will hopefully be a long lasting change in how China views civil rights. And I think the other important thing to remember is this is not happening in a vacuum. And that goes with almost anything. This isn't just about human rights. I mean, that's obviously the topic of conversation, and that's why we're here. But if we can look at China obviously balanced, a little more cooperatively, a little more collaboratively, I think we're going to go towards make some baby steps towards diffusing a situation which I can't speak for anyone but myself, but I think a lot of people in the national security community in the United States are concerned with an eventuality that includes a war with China. So the more we can try to kind of proactively diffuse that now, and on top of that, two birds, one stone, start working towards resolving this abhorrent situation with civil rights in China, so much the better. So we're not just looking at one solution to one problem. We're looking at multiple solutions to multiple problems just at the same time, which is of course not simple, but so that's really where the sting and the difficulty and the tediousness comes in of this whole thing.
Yeah. Well, as I said, look, thanks for the essay. Thanks for entering it into the contest. And I just tell the listener, our website is catholic.edu/CHR for Center for Human Rights. So /CHR. And you'll find Jonathan's essay and the other winners as we have them on the podcast. So it gives you something to think about. Like I said, we want to solve human rights issues, not just talk about them. And Jonathan's essay gives us something to think about. So Jonathan, thank you for being on the Barefoot Lawyer podcast.
Yes, absolutely. It's been my pleasure. I met and I'm sorry, I'm going to mispronounce his name.
Lawyer, Chen Guangcheng.
Yes, it was at a lecture that he was at in Dr. Walsh's class, or one of Dr. Walsh's class at CUA, and it kind of inspired me because he struck me as a very obviously practical, creative person, highly driven, and that really kind of drove the spirit of my essay, just having been in the same room with him and having heard him speak and heard about his challenges as well. So it was a very inspirational exercise, and I appreciate the opportunity to write it, and also, of course, to be here with you today, sir.
Oh, thank you, Jonathan. And we say to you listeners, we'll see you on next episode of the Barefoot Lawyer Reports on China.
The Catholic University of America's Center for Human Rights has published a documentary on the United Nations Universal Declaration on Human Rights. The documentary features world-class human rights experts, from former State Department officials to ambassadors and human rights activists. It can be found on our website at humanrights.catholic.edu.